And a big good morning to people in North America, where I know we've got people, and South America actually. So, whatever time of day it is with you, we really appreciate you taking time out of your day to join with us in this session. So, I'm Dr. Julian Skyrme, and my role, I'm the Executive Director for Social Responsibility and Civic Engagement at the University of Manchester. And I'm delighted to welcome you to today's session on advancing social responsibility through community engaged and participatory research. Um, I'm really pleased to help welcome you to this session. It's the fifth session actually we've done on as part of our University Social Responsibility Network online series. We've had some excellent sessions, and this is the fifth such session. And for those of you who are new to the USR network, we're a global group of universities committed to embedding social responsibility into our core missions, whether that's through our teaching, through our research, the way we do public engagement, or indeed how we operate as universities, as big landowners, as big employers, as big spenders of resources. So we cover all of those topics, and our members span, I think it's 6 continents now, isn't it? But we share a common belief really that higher education institutions should take a proactive role in their societies and be committed to being responsible to the societies that they serve. That's our common factor. Now, as universities, our commitment to social responsibility is about these 4 things I mentioned. Today, we are talking about research and how research can really advance societal goals, particularly through the methods we use in our research. So that's one way we can contribute to society. A second way, of course, and we've talked about this a lot in this network, is through our learning function, particularly, for example, through service learning. We've had previous sessions on that, which have been excellent. So our research, through our students, through the way we engage society. I think this session will look at that as well. This cuts across research and teaching, of course, through engaging with societies, whether that's through academics going on television or working with young people in schools or going out into communities or running an art gallery or a museum. We engage with societies in many ways, or influencing policymakers. We do a lot of that as universities. And then this 4th way, through how we operate. If your universities are anything like mine, you'll be one of the big employers in your city or your region or your place in your nation. You're a big employer. You spend a lot of money. We have big carbon footprints, which we need to manage. So these aspects of how we operate as well is an important aspect of social responsibility. But today's session is really focused on research, and particularly how we can do more engaged research. Now, what's interesting about this agenda is around the world, actually, not just in one particular country, we're seeing a growing momentum now behind co-produced and community-driven research. And you could describe this, I think, as being a move away from researching on or researching to people towards researching with. And I think in the sessions today, you'll really hear some examples of how we're doing research with communities. Now, and that's trying to move then from, it's a horrible word, isn't it? Research subjects or passive subjects to people who are more active partners, who we share the production of knowledge with, rather than us being the only holders of truth. So this shift has the power, I think, to transform not just academic knowledge. This feeds back into a core part of what does it mean to seek out truth and to be truth-seeking institutions through our research. It really impacts on that. But also it impacts, of course, on the lives and futures of communities around us. By listening, by involving people more, we have more of an opportunity to transform those societies in which we're based. So we're joined today by 2 outstanding speakers who will share innovative examples of how participatory research is making a real difference, not just in what is studied, but in who benefits and how. So I'll introduce each speaker in turn and we'll hear from them both. And then we're going to open up questions and discussion. I should have said as well that if you've got any questions at the time, you're welcome to put them in the chat, and Miranda will try and find them and let me know when it comes to questions. So you don't have to wait till the end. If you have a question, please feel free to put it in the chat. But we will be doing hands up at the end in the usual way. So so we've got, and I'll introduce Professor Carin Combrink properly just before she speaks. But let me just say a little bit about Laura first, who is our first speaker, because we've got 2 speakers. So Dr. Laura Breen, she's the Research Development and Impact Manager at the university where I work, at the University of Manchester in the UK. Laura plays a vital role in supporting researchers to embed impact and social responsibility into their work, particularly through innovative community engaged approaches. So Laura's going to share how the University of Manchester is helping to shape a more inclusive and impactful research culture through a particular project that she's been overseeing. So I'm going to ask Laura to speak for about 10 minutes, and then we'll get our second speaker in. So Laura, please, over to you. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Julian. I'll get this screen sharing right this time. There we go. Hopefully you can see that, can you now? Bill. So yeah, as Julian said, I'm the Research Development and Impact Manager in the Central Research Strategy team at the University of Manchester. And part of that role entails working with all the teams across the university that do valuable work to accelerate the impact of our research. So moving it from ideas and findings to benefit out there in the real world. And you can see some of them in this diagram. So it really is an ecosystem. And over the past 10 years or so, research funders in the UK have been increasingly asking those who are applying for funding to show evidence that their proposals have been co-produced. And this has grown in tandem with the rise of the research impact agenda over here and growing attention to inclusive research practices. So really bringing our social responsibility and research teams ever closer together. And as part of this, Research England, who are one of our core funders, started to allocate funding to universities to support participatory research. And they made this statement that participatory or co-produced research strengthens research outcomes by involving the communities and users of research, better recognising their experience, needs and preferences, and giving greater agency to communities to implement findings. So that contains a lot of presumptions about who has agency to give in the first place, and a presumption also that this type of research is positive without addressing how it was done or how to do it well. They also use the terms participatory and co-produced research interchangeably, so kind of leaving the ball in the university's court in terms of how they allocated this funding. So when I joined the university in 2023, I wanted to know what participatory research looked like at Manchester. So what kind of practices are people using? How can we support them to do it well? Because that really mattered. So as Julian's mentioned, social responsibility is one of the university's core strategic goals, but it's also woven through the other two goals. So research and discovery and teaching and learning. So we didn't just want to run with this presumption that working in this way is best practice in itself. But getting that understanding wasn't easy. So we are a very large institution. We've got over 7,000 academics and researchers. So knowledge of who's doing what with whom can be quite patchy just because there's so much going on. So we commissioned a team of external evaluators to run some workshops and interviews with colleagues at the university. And community partners where they were working with where possible to try and find out more about the research they were doing, the barriers they were facing, and to identify good practice, but really get a picture of what was going on. And in addition to this, we gave support for projects where, for example, we could help to produce resources that would share learning about research processes and build capacity. And we also said we'd create a series of case study films, which I'll return to later. So it's been a real learning curve, and that learning is very much ongoing and always will be. I chose the title Opening Up Participatory Research for this programme because that's what it is. So it's an exploration of what people told us about when we asked them about participatory research. We're not saying this is participatory research, because what we found when we did ask was there was a range of engaged research practices. Co-production and co-design featured heavily, but so did more traditional modes of engagement, such as collaboration and partnership working. So we know we've got work there to do around creating spaces for dialogue around different types of practice and their specificities. That's a hard word to say, that, isn't it? But those strands form the basis of the films I mentioned. So we aim to produce 8 films based on key themes that emerge from the mapping. Delays meant some were based on those themes and some are based on themes identified through getting to know people at the university and through other workshops. those films are online as part of an Engage Research Hub, and I'll share links to all these things shortly. So please do watch them. They are long because we wanted to show the nuances of these ways of working and serve as prompts for discussion. So we're not trying to claim we've got everything right and this is how to do things. It's, I don't think anybody's got it all right. It's sharing some of those discussion points. We've also tried to be honest about things that didn't go well. We met many of the issues that participatory research itself faced. So timing, funded deadlines, things don't always go smoothly. Our ethics film was quite fraught because of internal tensions, trying to strike a balance between allowing people to talk about the barriers that formal ethics processes can pose, but without professional services colleagues feeling like it was an attack on them. So those discussions are taking place in a project that's taking place off camera instead. Also, the people who signed up and wanted to be involved have largely worked locally. And we know there's lots of work going on across the globe that we can really learn from, that our researchers are part of. So that's a gap in the videos at the moment. But we also know hyperlocal is somewhere we've got real opportunities and that ethical imperative to build those dialogical and sustained relationships. And that really does come through in the films and the work we've seen. The case studies are largely from the arts, humanities and social sciences. And again, this might be because it's where that work is concentrated, but it might also be because of the language we're using. So that's another thing for us to reflect on, what terms are we using to bring people on board? And I say last, but definitely not least, diversity. So much of the gender and racial diversity in the films is within the groups we work with rather than the academics undertaking the work. So that's something we need to consider from multiple angles. I think in terms of who's undertaking the work and the value placed on it. Oops, I'm going backwards. Yeah. But also who spoke to us. So we wanted to flag that rather than pretending it's not there. But of course, this is where we build really. So we came up with a list of recommendations about how to improve our support and an action plan for that, which is focused in 4 areas. So we're developing communities of practice. As I've mentioned, we've got a project to make our ethics and payments processes more flexible and responsive. There's a web hub. We're also supporting a project across the universities of Liverpool, Manchester and Sheffield called the Co-Production Futures Inquiry. And that's building a knowledge base to lobby the higher education sector for system-wide change. So tackling the really big barriers that one institution alone can't. We launch the next stage of that project tomorrow, so kind of look out for details for that because that's really moving on. Plus work to improve understandings and recognition and kind of ongoing work to improve what we do ourselves. So a lot of that is obviously fixing the internal wiring so that we can work more responsibly and get on with the stuff that matters. But we're also working hand in hand with our closest communities on this. They're involved in all of this year's projects, so they're co-leading projects, they're in fellowship posts, on working and steering groups, so many more ways. We're working on our comms, so they showcase the mutual benefit. So it's not just our researchers' achievements, what do we get out of this joint working, how does it work together? Inspire, who's one of the amazing community organisations who you can see in the Solidarity film, they've brought many of the people involved in the projects together to help us to develop more appropriate ways of capturing the impact of engaged research that are useful to everyone involved. So it helps them to kind of get funding and articulate their own value as well as ours. We've got a pilot community conversations project, which I'm working on with Julian's team, bringing community members and researchers together to get to know each other. And that's from feedback that Julian's team received through our university strategy development and that I'd received through this work, that people really want opportunities for dialogue and to get to know each other as people. So to develop trust before the projects. And that's something we're kind of getting emerging learning from now, and we'll have more on that and how it might inform our ways of working soon. There's also an over-research communities project, which has kind of been one of the unexpected wonders of this work. So it started as a film about local communities' experiences being over-researched and extractive practice. So it's something we started last year. And the amazing Tina Carin, who you can see on screen, it's about this idea that communities are only visible when researchers come to take from them. But when that film came back last year, we felt it risked repeating some of that framing of local communities and harms that past encounters had unwittingly caused. So we didn't share that film, but we've been remaking it this year in tandem with a project that Tina and one of our researchers, Neve Kavanagh, have been doing to capture the experiences of local communities and the kind of visibility they do want. So sharing learning from what has worked, they're making an exhibition, there's podcasts, they're writing papers, and that's turned into something really special out of what initially looked like a failure, I guess. So that was real learning for all of us. And it's not just project-based, so we've embedded this further in our research strategies. So enabling open and impactful research is now a quarter of our research culture framework. And building in collaboration and interdisciplinarity are another quarter. So we're really trying to embed this in our ways of working. It's something that is part of what we do. It's not just a tick box exercise. And to end, because I know that's a lot, we're doing a lot, there's a lot going on. I thought I'd end with this quote from a community co-researcher, Marie Greenhalgh, who's in one of our films, which is about inclusion. And in that film, she reflects on the end of a project, but says, we will always know each other. And she speaks about how those relationships ripple out into subsequent work. So we're looking at how we support those sustained relationships and provide opportunities for ongoing connection. So it's very much a work in progress. We're trying, some things will fail, some will flourish. We're open to that. But I think the main thing is we're really seeing this as an ongoing commitment. So that's hopefully my 10 minutes.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Laura. That it's really interesting. We wanted to start with that presentation because Laura's role is working at a strategy and policy level across a whole organization. And I know that many of you in the room today you'll have colleagues like Laura who are doing similar work, who are there to try and enable people doing actual research to do the best types of participatory research. So if you've got any questions specifically for Laura, please feel free to put those in the chat now and she can try and answer. We're going to have a general conversation at the end, but if there's something you wanted to follow up, and I know Laura will share some of the web links, which you're welcome to look at. And if you wanted to put her in touch with equivalent people in your own institutions, certainly from a Manchester perspective, we're always keen to learn from other people. So just to say that, that's one of the benefits of these sessions where we follow things up afterwards. So please feel free to do that. We'd really benefit from that. So let me now introduce Professor Carin Combrink then. So Carin Combrink is a professor in University of Pretoria, also the head of Department of Architecture. She's a leading voice, I think, and you'll get a sense of this from the presentation. I'm really excited to listen to this. She's really is a leading voice in what you might call socially engaged architecture, and has really pioneered very, very participatory design methods that address spatial inequalities, community empowerment, social justice issues, and really thinking about how the university can engage in more equal terms with the communities it serves. So she's really going to talk about how architectural research can be a tool for both justice and transformation. So as well as the bit on architecture, I really want us to think about the methods as well, which I know is going to come through in Carin's presentation. So Carin, please, over to you. And we're really excited to listen to what you're going to say next. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Julian, and thank you so much for the opportunity to be here today. I'm going to start my timer so that I don't overrun. Thank you very much. It was lovely to listen to Laura as well and to recognize the kind of enthusiastic support that is starting to develop for this kind of work. It's really lovely to see that. So thank you for this opportunity. Let me get going. I'm going to be reflecting today on work that is being done in our department, mostly in the postgraduate. Let me just start this right. In the postgraduate part of our school. So it's in our situation, we've got honours and masters as the two postgraduate years. And this project that I'm reflecting on in particular actually spans over 6 years. So we had a collaboration for a 3-year period with Chalmers University of Technology, in which we understood and we recognized a very similar problem that we both had, that for years and years our students had been working on site, and they'd been, because they're very visual, they'd been making all of these beautiful maps and using Photoshop, and then it looks fantastic, and then a year later you want to go and verify some of this data, but it isn't accessible. And so collaborating with our colleagues in geography and various other faculties, we then developed this method over a 3-year period that we tested both in Sweden and in South Africa. And we called it the Ukudoba method, which means in Zulu to fish. So sort of fishing data and then putting that together in a shared data library so that you could access this information over time to be able to see trends, specifically because we often work in informal settlements where there isn't a lot of macro scale data available. And so we'd be working on fine-grained data and then seeing macro trends. So having this as a background, we then were very fortunate to have the next, sorry, I wanted to talk about this a little bit. So it was a question of making use of hybrid methods of drawing, using mobile functions on EpiCollect, Kobo Toolbox, and so on. But all of that is captured within the Ukudoba method. We were then able to say, okay, let's take a look at what we can do with this over a next 3-year period in which we understood that having a longitudinal relationship with a particular group of people, we'd be able to take that microdata, then delve deeper into needs analysis, and then to delve deeper into the possibility of co-creating community action plans. And so we then did this. We developed a project called the Co-Creating Wellness Project in a settlement called Melusi, which is to the west of Pretoria. So if this is Pretoria, Melusi is situated to the west. So it's sort of just to the side of the CBD. And this settlement developed very quickly, in less than 10 years, around, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but there's a quarry that existed there before, and it started evolving around this quarry. There was also a nursery here that belonged to the city of Tshwane where trees and, street trees were basically cultivated. And so Mido evolved in different eras, but mostly informal. And one part of it, Mido 2, actually became more formalized over time. But as you can see, it evolved very quickly, rapidly, and very informally. So just to give you a bit of a visual of that, what we then did is, since 2023, we then went through this process of doing the Ukudoba method of getting surveyed data. Then we went into 2024 and we did this needs analysis, making use of Manfred Max Neef's method of relational needs analysis that then evolved into community action plans this year. Just to show you a couple of images of it, when we started the team, it was a multidisciplinary, so it's transdisciplinary, people from various faculties that got together, and importantly, everybody collaborated on setting up the questionnaires from the different disciplines side. So from health sciences, from economic and management sciences, architecture, public health, etc., etc. We then introduced all of these to the communities to double check that they were comfortable with the questions that we were asking. Also, in our case, we had to make sure that everything was understood in various languages. And then our students, and you'll see also these images are of honours students, they're of Chalmers students that were part of this process. Master students were involved, community field researchers in Melusi and originally in Plastic View as well. So it was a very large team that went out there and engaged with the community on a door-to-door basis in the first year, where this hybrid method of collecting data was used. That then was taken back to our studios, where we also then had the people from the settlements joining our students in the studios to make sense of what we'd found and to corroborate the data to make sure it was all good and authentic. So from this process, in the first year, we identified very specific themes around urban agriculture, technologies, and existing businesses, huge concerns around water, from flooding through to toxic black water, and the impact that that has on the community, and then also opportunities that exist, very strong business networks that exist, etc. So we were able to really get some very solid data from the first year's process. In the second year, we then followed this MaxNev relational human needs analysis, quite a complex matrix along axiological and existential needs. And in order to get to this, we then used serious game methodology. So our master students developed these games. They were played on particular days with particular areas. It was quite an open opportunity for people to join in. This was then analyzed by our research team and our student team, ran through focus groups, again with complex groups in the settlement. And then from this, we were then able to identify specific satisfiers, impediments, and utopian ideas of needs that then arrived at specific synergistic solutions. That then formed the basis of what we did this year, in which we then said, okay, layering upon all of this data, what are we able to identify, revisiting some of the areas, critical areas, again, groups of field researchers, honors and master students, and senior researchers. Collectively, we then developed these community action plans, which were then shared with stakeholders from the City of Tshwane, from the Research Foundation, from NGOs, a whole mixed group of people. And then fundamentally, we were able to identify through these processes 3 core strategies that we thought would be important to keep focusing on as community action plans. The one, an incremental approach to how the streets could be upgraded within our overarching policy on an informal settlement upgrade, and what would that take for communities to participate in such upgrades. Economic opportunities ranging from digital inclusion, local agricultural opportunities, waste to business opportunities, where that could happen, how that could happen, who could participate. And then specifically looking at our community partner, Malusi Youth Development Organization, as a key player in how systemic and spatial interventions could contribute towards development. This then was taken further. So each year, following the data collection quarter, we would then be followed by a co-design quarter and a microscale type of live build intervention. So this year, it also went that route, and 2 particular projects were identified that were then co-created and co-built by the research teams, the students, the community members, etc. This is a small microscale waiting area at a clinic, and the other one is still happening. We're hoping it will be finished next week, is at MIDA, which is the education facility. So this would be also an additional space for use by the community organization. Along with this, our master students are continuing the work of co-designing the urban framework around the nursery, which is something that the City of Tshwane is very interested in. So this research/design/curricular/development process is all very interwoven with each other. And this is the initial draft, which is developing at quite a pace, because there's a very iterative loop between what has now become evident from all this research that was gathered over the past 3 years, what the City of Tshwane has in mind, what the people of Malusi have in mind. That's my timer to stop. And so this is very much an ongoing process. And going forward, we are hoping to be able to extend some of the research opportunities through the Department of Science and Technology, and hoping to collaborate further on this project. I think that's my sign to stop.
Thanks very much, Carin. That's such an amazing project. I know you could have. Thanks for keeping the time, because it's there's so rich in there, the different elements of the work and the long-term impacts you can see being put in place in a very logical way. Actually, that map at the end was fascinating. So thanks for sharing that. I should say as well, we'll share the slides with colleagues, arranged to do that on the USR website after this session as well, because I know certainly I'd like to look in more depth at what you talked about there, as well, as I'm sure others would. So what we're going to do now is as well as saying thanks for two brilliant presentations. It's your opportunity now to raise your hands. I think you know where to do that. For most of you, it's in the heart button at the bottom, react. If you click on that, there's a raise hand function. It's not there at the bottom with a hand. It's the heart. You click on it and then you can raise your hand. So in terms of asking questions, depending on the nature of the question, it might go to both panelists or it might be specifically towards one of the panelists. So please, over to you now to ask any questions. Or it could be an observation as well as a question. We prefer questions, I think, but observation is fine. Sure. Is there anybody there? Yeah, brilliant. So Sharik, first of all, and please unmute yourself. Thanks, Sharik. You can ask the first question.
Thank you for hosting this forum, and also thank you to the two speakers, Laura and Carin. My name is Sharik Sherwani. I'm an assistant professor at Utah Tech University in St. George, Utah, but coming to you from India as I'm vacationing there. So I really enjoyed listening to both the talks. This question is really for both of the eminent speakers. My question really is, because I'm also engaged in community research. So I remember specifically Laura had one of the points in one of the slides, inclusion, and I think Carin spoke to that as well. What does inclusion look like for you both and other attendees as well? Because for me, and I was really impressed with one of the points I think Laura or Carin had, wherein they said, we really think very highly of the communities once we go into those communities to collect data for focus groups and all that. So my question really is, if you both would be kind enough to speak, what does inclusion look like for you and for your researchers and collaborators when you go into those communities? Because what I hear from communities is, they're also sweet and kind and engaging and involving. But once you've collected the data, the best you all do is publish in scientific journals. You don't really return to our communities to see how that final data analysis output impacts our communities. If you'd be kind enough to speak a little bit to that, both of you or one of you. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Sharik. So I think that's a question for both people. So please feel free to jump in whichever order you want to, Laura and Carin.
I'm happy to take it if you'd like me to, Laura.
Yeah, sure. Sorry. I thought I'd unmuted myself, but yeah, sure.
Thank you for that question, Sharik. It's a terribly important one. And it's one that has impacted our work, I'd say, over the past 12 years. Because it's always that thing of your researchers really, your students even. Students, researchers come and go. Their currency is academic. But your community isn't. So your community hosts people, and they do obviously have a vested interest in the long-term outcome, but they also have a need for an immediate outcome. And so we intentionally ensured that our curricular work would have small-scale wins as well. And that's one of the reasons that we have included over the years the opportunity of the live build construction, which is a small win. It's really just a small thing, which has a very direct value to the community right now. But because they are part of the longitudinal process, they also see the value of the longitudinal engagement, the stakeholder engagements, and the kind of documentation that we empower them with. So they are left with booklets, they are left with websites, they are left with videos, etc. So the community, the ward councillors, for instance, are able to make use of the work that's done when they negotiate with council in terms of their upgrades. And so we are building that as shall we say, as an arsenal of knowledge that is co-developed so that the community is in a position to negotiate, to sit at the table, to not be marginalized when it comes to having a say over what they do further. And where we are now with that, particularly with the urban development and the framework and so on, where everybody is involved, we are hoping that that also will really empower this particular community. It's also one of the reasons that we focus in on one particular community over a longer period of time. And in this case, they are already very strong, and we were invited to join them. So they approached us. The Maido group is very strong. They have a very well-structured way of working with each other. And so they are a recognized community partner of the university, and they were keen to work with us because of the value that the research brings to them.
Thanks very much, Carin. It's a really good question. Laura, you don't have to, but if you wanted to add anything else in
No,
on
sorry.
idea of going in and out of communities.
Yeah, I think this has really been the driver for a lot of the things that we've been doing over the past couple of years, because when I looked at the previous projects that we funded, they were that kind of thing. They parachuted in and out, people weren't updated. So a lot of the things we're doing, like looking at the ethics processes, so we're looking at what consent means. The project that I spoke to about the over-research communities has very much come out of this. It's like you've been coming in and out for years, not just us, there are 5 universities in Manchester coming in and out of these communities. And that learning doesn't carry forward. So we're trying to capture that learning about, what has happened in the past? What can you tell us now? How can we share this with our researchers? Say, if you're thinking about going into these communities, here's all the stuff that's happened in the past that you need to be mindful for. How do we kind of come up with some principles and ways of working that don't do that? They're becoming more and more embedded in our processes. So some of the researchers, some of the kind of community co-researchers, they've had fellowships at the universities, they're involved in the projects in kind of longer term ways. And also the project that I spoke about that we're doing with Inspire, that is looking at how we build a sustainable network from some of those groups that we've worked with. So they're building the network of their own. They don't need us in some ways. It's like they can come to us where they want us. So it's a lot of that kind of sustainability has been at the forefront of what we've been doing to make it more inclusive. And yeah, I think that's it.
I'll ask Carin, because I know how this works in a Manchester context, but Carin, I'm sure it's the same for you in Pretoria. I'd be interested in your views. But one of the things we've noticed as well is you could have a research project that has a particular focus where researchers have certain skills and impacts. But actually, it's about those researchers speaking to other parts of the university. So the example I'll give you in Manchester is we had some researchers doing some amazing work on measuring levels of air pollution, the kind of chemistry of this, plus the health impacts in terms of respiratory medicine. But we learned that the way that you do planting and hedging and plant trees and particular species of plant could have an impact on reducing pollution levels. So we were able to join that up with some of our student volunteering projects, which wasn't anything to do with that researcher, but they had the ability to think strategically across the university for that quick win, Carin, because some of the other work would take a little bit longer than that initial piece of work. So I just wonder, Carin, whether you've, as well as in your own area in architecture, who else are you speaking to in your university, and how are you harnessing the rest of your university? I'm sure you are, for such an impressive project. So how does that work for you?
Yeah, it's actually remarkable. I think the moment you break those silos, wonderful things happen. So I can speak to 2 different aspects. The one was because we were working very closely with people from the public health aspect. One of the things that they started noticing, or they were commenting on, was when they see people in the clinics now, they also see they're not just seeing a patient with diarrhea, they are understanding that the water that we are seeing, that is black water, that is toxic, that is where the children are playing in amongst the water, would have a very direct impact on their health. And so, just from a health perspective, they were able to start seeing cause and effect already in the clinics. And then on the other hand, we are working closely with colleagues in the chemical engineering faculty or department, which is really interesting, where they are looking at the possibility of developing what do you call it, these big bags, digesters, So suddenly we're looking at living walls from our architecture, our landscape architecture colleagues. We're looking at people that are doing heat stress mitigation and looking at the whole circular thing of then saying, if you have plant material and you can put that in a biogas digester and you can create power with that or gas to cook from, then suddenly you're making people less reliant on, shall we say, economic opportunities that they don't have. So having to buy electricity, having to buy gas now, you can produce things, that can mitigate heat stress and it can create power. So those are the kind of research opportunities that are coming out of the process, and we're having proof of concept experiments going on, and then the community themselves are saying, okay, but we want to be part of this, to test it, to see how it could work for us, etc. So everything from construction to health to a circular economy that can deal with energy is all becoming part of this whole process, to really dig deep to understand that an informal settlement is not necessarily a problem that needs to be eradicated. Rather, this is a growth opportunity for Southern urbanism. And it's something that we need to understand from various perspectives to be able to ensure that our people that make up the majority of our new urbanism are actually the people that are in the driving seat, rather than the people that are always having to sit on the back row and be excluded from decision making. So it's a fundamental approach to spatial agency that is made possible through this kind of research and curricular engagement.
That's a great answer in terms of what inclusion looks like for you. And I'm just interested, I asked the question to the two speakers, but actually I could ask it to the audience. When that question that Sharik gave us, what does inclusion look like in research? This idea of going into a community, getting your data and getting back out. You've seen examples in Manchester and Pretoria, but what are you doing to try and counter that as well around the room? Because we have lots of people in the audience today who are either working with researchers or who are researchers, where the same criticism is made, isn't it? That we go in, we get what we want, we come out and we're extractive. What are the best examples we've got where we can avoid that?
So if you'd be kind enough to give me an opportunity to speak and share some of my experiences. And I know there are more eminent scholars in this forum right now, but for me, it has always been, so I work with, so my research is on caregiving. And I just got a grant, a small university grant on corporate social responsibility, not university social responsibility. However, in my experience in working with different kinds of communities, the challenge always is getting into the community, the gates, the gatekeeper that there may be. For me, as an outsider operating in a new area or a topic which doesn't really pertain to me, specifically, it's my research focus, research interest, but I'm not a part of that, for example, that community. So making inroads into the community has always been my problem number one. So it has always taken me and my students a bit of time to find a space, to establish those connections into those communities. Once you have kind of like had an in with those communities, people are so kind, so welcoming. I think Laura and Carin both alluded to this, that these are issues and problems are not just our, meaning researchers or students' problems. These are, remember, the community's problems, and the communities have solutions. Yeah. Sometimes we can be so over ourselves, forget. I'm from India originally. We went to India like, oh, I know everything. I got this money from Manchester or Pretoria, wherever. Like I have the knowledge and the money and the grant and all that. But like, no, come into the community, ask them how to solve problems. They may not have the financial and knowledge-based resources. I'll take that back. They may not have the financial resources, but they do have, historically, they do have resources wherein they can actually help find solutions together. So getting in is problematic. Once you have an in, it becomes easier as a researcher. Those have been two of
Yeah, it's a
my
really good point.
experiences.
Really good point, Sharik, about access into communities. And just thinking, if we take that a bit further, what you've just said there, Sharik. Laura, did you want to say something about how we've, particularly in Faculty of Biology, Medicine and Health, the PPIE Forum? I think that's a good example of people who we may have had a research relationship with, really helping to drive and be part of the institution and drive the research process. Maybe share, and I know other colleagues will be doing this, particularly in health, but we have this thing called PPIE, patient and public involvement and engagement. The I for involvement for me is that extra stage beyond the engagement. So Laura, did you want to say something about that?
I'm not heavily involved in it, but yeah, I think there's been this ongoing relationship, hasn't there? And we have annual celebrations. So people are involved in everything that happens around that area of work across our professional services staff and the community members, like the we're going to call them involvement champions, but the kind of public and patient involvement team, and they work together on everything. So everything that we decide as a university around that area of work is informed by people like the amazing Howiss in the kind of our professional services team, working really closely with the academics on that side and that team. And I think it is completely sustained, isn't it? Like they meet regularly, they work as one, don't they, in a way that's quite special. And it is that, like, we made a film about the fact, this going beyond involvement, and they do that. So PPIE can be a thing that's quite, I guess, externally imposed by funders, but the way we work at it is, how can we do more than that? Yes, this is the basic standard, but how do we do this better? How do we do all these other things on top of it?
Yeah, and I think so, for example, if we're doing dementia research, we'll have people with dementia who are there driving the research questions on the ethics, or people who have suffered a stroke, for example, with stroke research. And I think this is so normal in a lot of the medical and health sciences, even though perhaps those disciplines don't think as much methodologically as what people in the humanities and social sciences do when they're thinking of research methods. However, I do think there's a lot that the humanities can learn from the health sciences in that deep involvement because of the much greater ethical issues. Giving people a placebo drug, for example, you really have to think about the ethical issues when you're undertaking this style of research in a way that perhaps when we're researching poverty or something, people don't have always the same sensitivity. So I think it's a really interesting way of really involving people. So it's we've got 10 minutes to go, and I want to give people 5 minutes of time back because I'm a kind chair and I realize that we're all really busy as well. So let me just start to just say, first of all, thank you for our brilliant speakers, to Laura and to Carin, and to our organizers, Miranda and Jessica, and all of you for joining us today. I think for me, what I've seen in this session is that when research is co-created with communities, you get this dialogue. I think you've seen some great examples of that. You get the trust and that lived experience. And yes, that leads to greater impact, but also leads to better research. And sometimes people ask us the so what, is this a nice thing to do? Is this a kind thing to do? Is this a socially just thing to do? Now, this is central to our role as socially responsible universities, to think about this, to think about serving society. But for me, the big take home is this is also true to what's always been our academic mission, which is truth seeking. So a clear message for me is that participatory research is more than just outreach. It is that, of course it is. You have to understand engagement and outreach, but it's about truth seeking. In other words, the knowledge that we can create through these styles of research are richer, they're more valid, and they're more relevant, I think, when it reflects these wider range of voices, these different perspectives, these ways of knowing. And I think Carin's example today really shows how you just get better quality research. So as we wrap up, I'd love to invite you, if you've got any other questions, to leave them in the chat and we can get back to people. We will be sharing today's slides and a video recording with you soon, so that you can revisit this session or pass on when we get the video to this. If you feel, I thought that was really interesting, I wish my colleague could have come, I'd love to share it with a colleague. Please, we will have a YouTube link for this through the USR YouTube channel So please feel free to share this in due course. And also look out for session number 6. We'll be advertising that soon, so look out for that. So until then, thank you so much for all of your time today and your insight and your shared belief in this commitment to this research, that we can and should do better when it comes to involving the public in our research and working much more closely with the people that we serve. I think we all agree that that's an important mission for our universities, and conversations like today really help us take that agenda forward. So thank you, everyone, and good morning, good evening, good afternoon to everybody, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, whether that's bed or a full day of work between you, or like me, about 3 more hours to go if I'm lucky. So thank you very much, everyone, and hope to see you all soon, and stay well. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.